The bell tolled, and its cracked voice shuddered through the empty streets like the last breath of a dying city. Bronze, once proud and pure, now split by fire and siege, carried its broken music over stone and smoke. It did not call the faithful to worship anymore. It summoned only silence. The note wavered against the walls, then faded into the hollow air, leaving behind an ache that clung like frost to every doorway and window. A coin lay in the dust at the edge of the square, a copper penny dulled by countless hands. Its face caught the faint gleam of dawn, a sliver of light on a world otherwise smothered in gray. It had once bought bread, once bought warmth, once bought a child a moment of joy. Now it gleamed uselessly, abandoned in the filth, a relic of a city where hunger had stripped value from every metal, every promise, every word. The scent of burnt grain carried on the wind, sweet and bitter, a reminder of the stores already lost. Ash drifted into alleys like pale snow, settling on cloaks and hair, mingling with the smell of old blood ground into the cobblestones. Each breath carried the memory of fire. Each breath was an act of endurance. The cold crept in like an invader of its own, through shutters, through cloth, through bone, while outside the walls the true enemy waited. The stairwells that wound through the towers had grown slick from hurried feet. Once the spiral steps rang with boots of guards and the shrieks of children carried up into their mothers' arms. Now they echoed with nothing. Footfalls rose and fell, but even sound seemed hesitant to linger, as though the air itself had grown weary of company. At the top of the stairs, the view offered no deliverance. Beyond the battlements stretched only emptiness, snow-dusted fields, the black dots of enemy camps, and smoke trailing in patient ribbons from their fires. Within the cathedral's hollow heart, a priest held a gospel against his chest. Its pages, once bright with gilded letters, bore stains now, some the damp of tears, some the darker imprint of blood pressed by dying hands. His fingers trembled against the leather binding. His lips moved soundlessly, a prayer unvoiced, for there were no ears left to hear it. Above him, the ribs of the vaulted ceiling caught the light of a guttering candle, its wax dripping like slow tears onto the flagstones below. Outside, their adversaries waited with cruel patience. Spears rested in the frost, their iron tips dull with condensation. Helmets gleamed faintly in the pallid sun, like the eyes of carrion birds fixed on prey too weak to move. They had time. They had food. Their fires sent the scent of roasting meat across the walls, an insult carried by the wind into stomachs that had forgotten satisfaction. Inside the walls, hope waned like the last embers in a cold hearth. Families clutched their children closer, feeding them thin broth made of water and boiled leather straps, praying the small ones would not notice the bitter taste. Rats scurried boldly across rafters, fat from stores long since spoiled, gnawing their freedom into wood as if mocking the trapped souls below. The bells, the coins, the prayers, symbols clung to with desperate hands, spoke of a city refusing to let itself dissolve into memory. The sound of the cracked bell was a heartbeat, faltering but still pulsing. The coin in the dust was a promise of exchange, even if the exchange was now only between hunger and despair. And the priest's gospel was a reminder that even when words fade, the act of clutching them can still keep faith alive. A dove swept across the towers, its wings brushing the upper stones as though measuring their endurance. It circled once, twice, its flight fragile in the pale light. To those who looked up, it was both mockery and mercy. Mockery that it could leave while they remained bound, mercy that it still dared to pass overhead at all. The city's watchers tracked it with tired eyes, the beat of its wings loud against the silence. Then it dipped low, curved, and vanished beyond the ramparts, carrying their gaze with it. And then, from beyond the walls, a sound that froze even breath, the horn. Low, guttural, it tore through the morning like a wound. The defenders stiffened on the battlements, hands tightening around weapons long rusted from rain and overuse. In courtyards below, women hushed their children, pressing faces into cloth to smother cries. The priest lowered his eyes, lips trembling. The horn sounded again, closer, stronger, as though the earth itself were drawing breath. The city held that breath, waiting. Not with expectation of deliverance, but with the grim patience of those who know only the form of their ending remains to be written. And yet, within that silence, another kind of endurance flickered. The hunger could not erase loyalty. The smoke could not extinguish faith. Even as the gates groaned under the weight of siege engines, even as the walls shook with the fists of war, a strange clarity fell upon the besieged. They were more than their hunger, more than their fear. They were witnesses, and in witnessing, they endured. A child at the gate whispered to his mother, "Will the bells ring again?" She pressed her lips to his hair, not answering. For how could she? Yet the boy's question lingered in the air like incense, as though belief itself might be enough to mend cracked bronze and split stone. And when the gate shuddered, when dust fell like rain from its timbers, the city stood together, not as soldiers, nor even as survivors, but as voices, silent or spoken, bound by the weight of their own memory. For even as walls crumble, memory endures. The horn's cry faded into distance, leaving only the sound of crows circling overhead. Their wings beat a rhythm against the sky, each stroke a reminder that above the smoke, above the hunger, there still existed a world of air, of flight, of freedom. The defenders looked up once more. For a moment, their eyes followed not the enemy, nor the crumbling gate, but the dark birds tracing their circles. The chapter closed with that sight, wings in the gray sky, circling patiently, as though waiting for what must come. The city stood at the threshold, suspended between collapse and remembrance. And beyond the wall, drums began to beat, a rhythm that would carry the story deeper into the heart of endurance, into the heart of hunger, into the heart of sacrifice. The night is heavy, stretched tight like a black veil over stone walls and broken towers. No stars move, no wind stirs. The courtyard lies still, as if the world itself has been swallowed whole. At its center, a brazier burns low, the last curl of smoke rising as though reluctant to leave this place. It twists into the dark sky, a fading thread unraveling into silence. Below, the stones are damp, cold with the breath of centuries, and the only sound is the scrape of metal. A spearhead dragged softly across the ground, its point carving into the frozen earth. A guard's hand lingers there, fingers knotted and pale, gripping the shaft as if his bones alone hold back the tide beyond the walls. Around him, shadows move like phantoms. Families huddle in the cloisters, the faint whimper of a child stifled in the folds of a mother's sleeve. Her touch is fragile, cloth worn thin from years of work, yet in that moment it is the only barrier between her son and despair. The smell of sickness lingers in the air, bitter and sour, mixing with the rancid memory of food long since rotted. The walls of the fortress seem to exhale with them, breathing misery back into their lungs. Beyond the battlements lies the glow of countless fires. The enemy's camp stretches across the fields like a second city, their torches flaring in rhythm with laughter, the shuffle of feet, the snort of horses. Shadows rise against canvas and wood, tall, confident, unafraid. Each light is a blade piercing the darkness, reminding the trapped souls within the walls that abundance exists just beyond reach. The scent of roasting meat drifts inward, borne on the wind like an insult, wrapping itself around hollow stomachs. The starving try to swallow against the phantom taste, but their throats are dry, their mouths raw from chewing grass, leather, and bone. The courtyard remembers better days. Here once clattered armor, once rang out the clash of steel against steel. Here banners had snapped proudly in the wind, and the laughter of soldiers was as common as church bells. Now only echoes remain, pressed into the stone like ghosts that refuse to leave. Scattered along the flagstones lie shards of broken pottery, pitchers that once carried water from clean wells. They glint faintly in the firelight, fragments of a promise no one believes in anymore. A bell tolls faintly in the distance. Its voice is hollow, uncertain, as though confused at its own purpose. Is it noon? Is it night? Or is it simply another death, marked by bronze too weary to distinguish one loss from another? The sound carries thinly across the towers, landing heavy on the hearts of those who remain. In a corner of the hall, by the dim light of a candle stuttering in its wax, a young scribe dips his quill into ink. The ink is thick, drying too quickly in the cold. His hand shakes as he writes, not from age but from hunger. He carves each letter slowly, carefully, though he knows no messenger will pierce the enemy lines. He writes because he must, because words are the last fortress they still command. His parchment is a lament, a testimony that these days of hunger and silence were real, that these faces once belonged to the living. The sound of his quill is the only rhythm that holds steady against the silence. The gates creak under the weight of time, wood straining as the cold contracts its fibers. Beyond them, the deep thrum of a siege engine can be heard, a steady groan like the heartbeat of some great beast waiting to strike. The defenders do not flinch anymore at the sound. Fear has long since been worn into resignation. Yet each vibration in the stone beneath their feet reminds them of the inevitable, of the fragile span of wood and iron that keeps the torrent from rushing in. The mother shifts her child on her lap. He whispers, though his voice is thin. "Will we wake tomorrow?" She presses her lips to his hair, holding him tighter, not answering. For there are no answers here, only the echo of the unanswered question hanging in the cold air, shared silently by all who sit in shadow. And still, silence reigns. Silence more oppressive than swords. It wraps around them, filling the spaces where music once played, where voices once called across markets, where footsteps once hurried across bridges. Now there is only the slow, endless waiting. The waiting becomes a weight greater than any wall, greater than any enemy. The sentinel at the courtyard grips his spear tighter. His eyes drift toward the sky, where clouds hang low, unbroken, hiding the moon. For a moment, he wonders if the heavens too have turned away, closing their doors against this suffering. He presses his palm against the carved stones of the fortress wall. The cold bites back, yet he clings to it. The wall has endured centuries, wars, and weather, and so must he. A raven croaks from a distant tower, its harsh cry cutting through the stillness. Its wings beat once, twice, before it vanishes into the dark beyond the walls. The sound lingers, though brief, reminding them that life exists elsewhere, unbound by gates and hunger. The scribe lays down his quill. His ink-stained fingers rest upon the parchment where names have been written, names that no longer answer when called. He closes his eyes, whispering not to himself but to them, to the memory of their voices. His words are simple, yet weighted with all the grief of a city. You will not be forgotten. The horn does not sound tonight. No charge, no fire, no clash. Only silence. But silence is its own kind of siege, more relentless than any army. It creeps into the mind, into the marrow, into the dreams of those who still breathe. It convinces them that nothing remains but the waiting. And so the night deepens. The brazier fades. The courtyard grows colder. The ink dries on the scribe's page. Somewhere, in the sleeping city, a dog howls once, then is cut short. The fires of the enemy glow ever brighter, each one a reminder of life lived beyond hunger. Tomorrow may bring thunder, may bring the sound of battering rams and shouts of victory or ruin. But tonight belongs to silence, to the heavy pause between breaths, to the stillness that crushes the spirit more cruelly than steel. And yet, even in this quiet, there is something that endures. In the broken bells, in the trembling quill, in the whispered prayers that rise like smoke into a starless sky, there is the faint rhythm of a people not yet erased. A rhythm fragile, but unyielding. The night waits, the city waits, the story waits, suspended between survival and surrender. As dawn approaches with footsteps the walls can already feel. The candle trembles in its iron holder, its flame bending and bowing to the drafts that slither through the arrow slits of the stone tower. The light flickers across walls, damp with centuries of breath, its glow spilling into the hollow darkness like a confession whispered too late. Wax drips down, thick and slow, gathering into small hardened pools that resemble tears. Each droplet falls with a faint hiss, each one marking time for those who have no calendar left. No hourglass, no promise of tomorrow. To the weary hands clutching its base, this candle is not simply fire. It is a fragile soul, a final tether to life, a reminder that the city has not yet been swallowed by night. Beyond the windows, rooftops vanish into a mist as if the world itself recoils from the suffering below. Smoke seeps upward from broken chimneys, thin and gray, joining with the fog to cloak the city in a veil of mourning. Frost sharpens the banners left hanging on the ramparts, their cloth stiffened into silence. Where once they snapped proudly in the wind, announcing sovereignty and strength, now they hang like stiffened corpses, their colors faded, their edges brittle as bones. From a distance, the city looks asleep, but inside the walls, no one dreams. The horn of the enemy calls again, low and steady, rolling across the frozen moat. It is not the cry of a charge, but of endurance, a reminder to those trapped inside that their torment is seen, measured, savored. The sound threads itself through the streets like a noose pulled tighter with every passing hour. Children press their hands to their ears, yet still the vibration lingers in their chests, an echo that rattles inside ribs grown thin by hunger. In the scriptorium, a clerk bends over his ledger. His hands are cracked, raw with cold, the nails rimmed with black. He tightens the leather strap that binds the book, though its weight has become unbearable. Each entry he makes grows slower, less precise. He notes the dwindling stores of barley, the rotting rye, the vermin bold enough to run across the tables where bread was once cut and shared. His quill dips into the last vial of ink, thickening at its edges, threatening to dry before his work is done. Latin prayers slip from his lips, fragmented phrases stitched into the silence. He is not writing only for the present. He is writing against forgetting. His ink, his words, his stubborn recording, they are a fortress of their own, one that resists not the swords at the gate, but the erosion of memory. A sparrow flutters into the room, its small body shivering against the cold. It lands on the ledger, its claws scratching faintly on parchment. The clerk looks at it with hollow eyes, and for a moment, he cannot tell if the bird is real or conjured by starvation. He watches its chest rise and fall, rapid, insistent, alive. The bird pecks once at the page, smudging the ink, then lifts into the rafters, wings beating against the chill. The sound is brief, but it reminds him of what beating hearts sound like, what survival means when stripped bare of comfort. Down in the courtyards, the streets echo with muted voices. Families whisper over boiling pots filled not with food but with water, flavored by bones long picked clean. A mother dips a cloth into the broth and presses it against her child's lips, fooling the body into believing it has eaten. The scent is thin, a ghost of nourishment. Across the street, an old man crouches beside a shuttered door, muttering psalms as he strokes the handle of a rusted key that no longer opens anything. The gesture is useless, but it is familiar, and in familiarity he finds a moment of peace. The hunger becomes more than physical. It twists thought, weakens memory, stretches time into unbearable lengths. Men dream of feasts they never had, of grapes pressed to bursting, of roasted meat spitting over flames. Women taste phantom bread on their tongues as they sleep, only to wake with mouths filled with bitterness. Even prayers are spoken less in hope than in desperation, voices straining upward, not for salvation but for acknowledgement that suffering has not gone unseen. Yet still the candle burns, still the clerk writes, still the sparrow returns to the rafters. These small, fragile gestures become defiance, each one a refusal to vanish quietly. The flame sputters but refuses to die, even as drafts tug and twist it. The ink may smear, but words carve themselves into permanence. The bird may be small, yet its wings carry the weight of something larger, the reminder that life endures beyond walls and hunger. The enemy knows this. Their horns blare not to signal assault, but to erode will. Their fires blaze not to warm their own, but to taunt the city's darkness. They understand that a fortress is not broken only by stone collapsing, but by hope corroding. And so they wait, patient, relentless, while inside the defenders stand as shadows of themselves, their greatest weapon, not their steel, but their memory, their ability to remember they are more than hunger, more than victims of silence. The candle sputters once more, its flame thinning to a thread. The clerk leans forward, shielding it with his palm, the wax scalding his skin as it drips. He does not flinch. He will not allow it to die. Not yet. In that fragile light, his eyes glimmer with something fierce, something unbroken. He breathes out slowly, and the breath steadies the flame. Outside, the horns fall silent. The enemy waits. The city waits. Between them, the flame dances on, fragile and defiant. And as the night deepens, a new sound stirs, faint, distant, the muffled coughs of fever beginning to spread among the weak. Hunger has hollowed them, but now another shadow moves through the streets, quiet, invisible, carried in breath. The chapter closes on the candle's glow, steady yet trembling, casting long shadows on the walls. Shadows that hint at what comes next, not only hunger, but sickness, creeping into the silence like a second siege. A red dawn bleeds across the horizon, seeping into the cracks of broken stone and shattered walls. The sky itself seems wounded, its light raw and uncertain, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers of despair over the courtyard. There, where once laughter and music had drifted on the air, the ground is littered with the husks of barley heads, thin, shriveled, half gnawed by vermin. Their stalks lie limp, scattered as though abandoned by the earth itself. Harvested too late, claimed by mouths that have no conscience. The wind stirs them gently, carrying the sour scent of rot along the parapets, pressing it into the lungs of all who remain. The defenders breathe it in, and with each inhalation, their hearts sink deeper into the pit of hunger. At the center of the courtyard, a knight kneels in silence, his armor dulled to gray by soot and frost. His sword, once bright with the reflection of sunlight, lies broken across his knees, the edge blunted, the hilt cracked. He stares at it with hollow eyes, seeing not the steel but the lives it failed to protect. Beside him rests a crust of bread, so small and dry that it is little more than a memory of sustenance. His hand hovers over it, trembling, not with greed but with the weight of choosing whether to take it for himself or give it away. His breath fogs the morning air, the mist rising like incense, an offering to a sky that does not answer. From the cloisters, the soft murmur of nuns drifts outward, a weaving of Gothic Latin, rising and falling in rhythm like the tide. Their voices echo through stone corridors blackened by smoke, each note frayed at the edges, yet still persistent. They move with care, their habits swaying in the cold air, their feet brushing over the scorched floor. In their hands, they carry relics wrapped in linen, fragments of bones, carved crucifixes, broken chalices, treasures of faith guarded even when the body itself is left unguarded. A nun pauses, her face veiled in shadow, and slides a rusted iron key into the bundle, binding it tight with trembling fingers. The key opens nothing now. Its purpose is lost, yet to her it remains a symbol, a reminder that doors once existed, that sanctuary was not always out of reach. The walls are scarred with the memories of fire. Charred streaks crawl upward like black veins, the remnants of a torch flung in desperation, quenched by stone but leaving its wound behind. The air within these walls tastes of ash and soot, mingling with the iron tang of blood that lingers even after snow has tried to wash it away. Each step echoes as though the stones themselves remember, carrying the weight of every fall, every scream, every whispered prayer that has seeped into their mortar. On a ledge above, a bird shifts uneasily. Its thin claws scrape against the stone as it taps, once, twice, against the edge of an arrow slit. Its eyes glimmer darkly, reflecting the pallid light of dawn. Then it stretches its wings, skeletal against the sky, and beats them once before gliding upward. In its ascent, the defenders see both a warning and a promise. The wings cut through the smoke that hangs heavy above the city, circling the towers like omens written in air. The bird disappears into the clouds, leaving behind only silence and the faint stirring of feathers carried away on the wind. The knight lowers his gaze. The crumb of bread in his palm has grown damp with the frost of his breath. He closes his hand around it, fists tightening as if he could wring more life from its dry weight. His lips move in silence, perhaps in prayer, perhaps in guilt. Around him, children cough, their voices brittle, their ribs visible beneath cloth patched too many times to hold warmth. Mothers cradle them, rocking in slow rhythm, their lullabies too faint to mask the sound of hunger gnawing from within. The nuns continue their chant, their voices weaving through the air like threads binding flesh to spirit. The sound does not dispel hunger, nor silence the drums faintly beating beyond the walls, but it holds the defenders together in invisible strands. Each word is a shield, fragile yet necessary. Each note is a breath that says, "You are not alone." Beyond the ramparts, the enemy stirs. A distant horn cuts through the stillness, its sound heavy with inevitability. Siege engines creak as they are drawn closer, their wooden beams groaning under the strain of rope and iron. The rhythm of drums rises from the fields, a deep thud that echoes against the stones, rattling through bone and memory. For those within the city, it is not merely sound, it is the pulse of time itself, measuring how long they can endure before the walls collapse. A nun stops her chant. Her hands hover over the bundle of relics, tightening the linen, pressing the rusted key deeper into its folds. She closes her eyes, lips whispering a final word. The sound is too soft to catch, yet it lingers in the air like the last thread of smoke from a dying candle. The knight rises slowly, sword in one hand, bread in the other, the two weights equal in his grasp. He turns his gaze toward the gate, where shadows deepen, and the sound of wood groaning under pressure grows louder. A single shaft of light breaks through the clouds, falling across the courtyard. It touches the broken sword, the bundle of relics, the limp heads of barley scattered in the dirt. For an instant, the scene seems frozen in glass, a tapestry woven of hunger, faith, and endurance. The wind stirs, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and snow, a promise of winter yet to come. And then the horn sounds again, deeper, closer, its cry swelling until it seems the very stones might split. The defenders lift their heads. Some clutch relics, some clutch weapons, some clutch only each other. But all know the moment has come. The dawn grows brighter, but the air grows colder. The knight presses the bread into the hands of a child beside him. The child looks up, eyes wide, but no words are spoken. The knight turns toward the gate, his broken sword heavy in his grip. The nuns' chant resumes, their voices thin yet unbroken, rising against the drumbeat of war. And as the first shadows of the enemy stretch across the wall, the city holds its breath. Between hunger and faith, between despair and defiance, they prepare to face what comes. The sound of the horn fades, replaced by the groan of wood, the shudder of iron, the thunder of the earth itself trembling beneath the march. The chapter closes with the image of the key, wrapped in linen, pressed close to the chest of a nun who does not look away from the gate, a symbol of doors once opened, of sanctuary once promised. And as the drums draw nearer, that key waits, rusted but unyielding, for the story that will unfold when the gates finally break. A tremor runs through the chapel, subtle at first, then heavy, like the groan of a living beast pressing against the walls. Dust shakes loose from the rafters, drifting downward in pale clouds that glow faintly as sunlight pierces the stained glass window. The glass itself quivers, its colored panes fractured by cracks, yet still clinging to their fragile place. A shaft of scarlet light spills across the nave, falling on faces bent in prayer, faces hollowed by hunger and fear. The air smells of incense, burned too many times from the same frail sticks, mingling with the damp, earthy musk of stone soaked by centuries of rain. Beneath it all lingers a sour undercurrent, the odor of sickness, of bodies long confined within walls that no longer breathe freely. In the shadows, a boy kneels, his frame slight, his fingers raw from cold. He clutches a broken rosary, its beads scattered, the thread severed by careless hands or cruel fate. He traces each bead across the stone floor, the sound sharp like the faint rattle of bones. His lips form silent words, prayers carried not for salvation but for endurance, whispered not to saints but to the silence itself. Around him, others bow their heads, their whispers overlapping until they weave into a low hum that rises like smoke toward the vaulted ceiling. Outside, the world rumbles with violence. The sound of siege engines presses inward, deep cracks and groans that vibrate through the floor beneath kneeling knees. Ropes tighten, wooden arms creak, the shudder of massive stones hurled toward the walls echoes like distant thunder. The rhythm is unyielding. The city breathes in time with the enemy's machines, each vibration a reminder of how fragile the stones are, how fragile the flesh within. The gargoyles watch. They peer down from the crumbling eaves, their eyes wide, carved in the shapes of nightmares meant to ward off evil, yet powerless now to turn it aside. Their faces, twisted in grotesque defiance, look like mirrors of the people below. Some mouths stretch in silent screams. Some leer as though mocking. Rain has streaked their stone cheeks like tears, but still they hold their posts, grim witnesses to the slow undoing of the fortress they adorn. The acolyte feels the tremor pass through his knees and into his bones. He presses the rosary beads closer to his lips, their surface cold, carrying the faint taste of dust. His breath fogs against them, and for a moment he imagines the beads warming under his devotion, as though life itself might return to dead stone and broken glass. He lifts his head toward the crucifix above the altar, its figure darkened by centuries of smoke. The Christ looks down, arms stretched in eternal surrender, but even the wood seems tired, brittle, its weight sagging against the nails. The air grows heavier, each breath more difficult than the last. From the high windows filters the faint, bitter scent of fire, carried from enemy camps beyond the wall. With it comes the taunt of roasting meat, the reminder that abundance lies just beyond reach, that those who surround them feast, while within these walls hunger gnaws through bone and marrow. Mothers tighten their shawls around children, though the cloth is threadbare, more holes than fabric. One woman presses her fingers to her child's lips, whispering, "Taste the prayer, not the hunger," though her voice is cracked with doubt. A monk steps forward into the nave, his voice rising in a chant. The notes are frail, his breath shallow, yet the words pierce the air with something stronger than volume. Latin syllables echo against the stone, ancient sounds layered with centuries of faith. His voice falters, then steadies, joined by another, then another, until the chapel is filled with voices weaving together into a fragile shield. The hymn vibrates through the floor, shaking dust from the beams above, pushing against the groans of the siege engines outside. It does not stop the assault, but it gives shape to defiance. The boy clutches his broken rosary tighter. One bead slips from his hand, rolling across the stone. It strikes another, then another, until the beads scatter like raindrops, their clicking filling the silence between chants. The sound is small, yet it carries, echoing off the walls like a reminder that even broken things leave a mark, that even shattered prayers ripple outward. He gathers them quickly, hands trembling, as though afraid that leaving them behind would mean leaving himself behind. From outside comes a louder strike, the unmistakable crash of stone against stone. The walls tremble, dust raining down in thicker clouds. The stained glass window shudders violently, one shard of blue breaking free, falling to the floor where it shatters into 100 glittering fragments. The congregation gasps, but the chant does not break. The monk's voice rises, hoarse yet unyielding, as though daring the walls to collapse around him. The boy places the broken bead into his palm, pressing it hard enough to leave an imprint, and closes his fist until it feels like a weapon. The gargoyles outside do not move, but the light shifts across their faces. For a moment, the dawn catches their stone eyes, and they seem alive, filled with grief. The acolyte lifts his gaze again, staring at them through the crack in the window where cold air seeps in. He wonders if they weep for the people or for themselves, condemned to stand forever as silent witnesses. The tremor subsides. The chant softens, fading into whispers, the final note held longer than the breath that carried it. The chapel falls quiet again, the silence almost as heavy as the siege. The boy releases the bead from his palm and sets it on the altar, beside the shattered fragment of glass. One symbol broken, one whole, both resting together in uneasy balance. Beyond the portcullis, the drums resume. Their rhythm is slower now, steady, deliberate, like the heartbeat of something vast and merciless. The sound travels through the stone, through the pews, through the fragile chests of those who listen. Yet, within the chapel, the air feels different. Not lighter, not freer, but tempered, as though silence itself has absorbed the prayer, carrying it forward into the waiting dark. The acolyte stands. His knees ache, his fingers bleed from the beads, but he stands taller than before. In the hush that follows, the broken window casts a pale light across the crucifix, across the boy's face, across the gathered faithful. The fragments of glass glitter on the floor like stars fallen into dust. And there, in the shifting glow, the question lingers. When the walls finally break, will prayer be enough to hold them together? Or will silence claim all that remains? The answer is not yet given. But the next chapter begins to stir, in the cough of sickness in the back pew, in the way the cold wind cuts deeper through the broken glass, in the scent of ash that grows stronger with each passing hour. The siege tightens, not only outside, but within. The city's struggle shifts from stone against stone to body against the invisible hand of hunger and disease. And as the boy presses the bead once more to his lips, the story moves forward, carried on a breath, both fragile and defiant. A crack of light slices through the ruined gatehouse, thin as a blade yet merciless in its clarity. The boards lie splintered where iron once bound them, jagged nails rising like rusted teeth from the wreckage. The morning air seeps in cold and damp, smelling of mud, iron, and ash. It carries with it a sound, faint at first, then steady, a low sob echoing beyond the walls. The weeping of a child or the earth itself, no one can tell. Half buried in rubble rests a shoe, small, leather soft, cracked at the seams from frost. Its laces are broken, its surface darkened by dirt and time. Around it lie scattered stones blackened by fire, and beside it, a torch sputters weakly, flame licking at the damp air before shrinking to smoke. The smoke twists upward in fragile coils, then breaks apart, leaving only the faint smell of charred wood to cling to the walls. Each shadow it casts trembles, as though the stones themselves are haunted by what they have seen. A sentinel lingers near the breach. His frame is gaunt, eyes hollow, lips cracked from thirst. His armor hangs loose, straps worn thin, rust creeping into the joints. He presses his back to the wall, seeking strength from stone that has held against centuries of storms and wars. His hand rests on a carved griffin etched into the masonry, its form eroded by time but still recognizable. He traces its outline with a trembling finger, the ridges sharp against his skin. In that worn relief, he imagines protection, a guardian that once stood fierce and unyielding. But now the griffin is only stone, and his own hand shakes as if it knows what the creature cannot defend. Beyond the wall, the drums begin again. Their rhythm is low, deliberate, patient, the sound of inevitability dressed as music. Each beat rolls across the frozen earth, pressing into the stones, pressing into ribs. It is the sound of a predator's heart, steady and sure, reminding the hunted that escape is not possible. The sentinel listens, each thrum lodging deeper in his chest, rattling in his hollow bones. He shuts his eyes, and for a moment he imagines silence, imagines that the beating might stop. But it does not. The drums continue. Inside the city, life bends to silence. Bread has been reduced to crumbs, measured out with trembling hands, shared in fragments too small to sustain. Mothers crumble their portion into children's palms, pretending to eat though their lips remain dry. The last jars of water have grown cloudy, fouled by rot. Rats scurry along beams, fat from grain stolen in the dark, their squeaks brazen, unafraid. To strike them down would mean one less scrap of food to eat tomorrow, one less distraction from the gnawing emptiness within. Hunger has become the city's truest weapon and its cruelest executioner. The sentinel opens his eyes. A church bell tolls in the distance, the sound muffled, almost ashamed of its own voice. Its chime drifts into the gatehouse, slipping between the cracks where daylight enters. The sound is warped, as though swallowed by the silence that presses on all sides. To some, it means prayer. To others, it means death. The sentinel listens, and he cannot decide which it is. He closes his palm around the griffin's carved edge until it cuts into his skin. Blood beads at his fingertip, small and dark. The pain steadies him, pulling him back from despair. He presses harder, leaving his mark against the stone, as if trying to write himself into its memory, to carve his own defiance where the griffin once stood proud. Behind him, the air stirs faintly, the rustle of cloth, the shifting of weary feet. Others stand in the shadows, waiting not for orders, not even for hope, but for the simple act of endurance. A torch falls silent, its last ember vanishing into black smoke. The smoke drifts upward, curling around the shattered beams of the gatehouse, clinging to the cracks like a final breath refusing to disperse. The sentinel watches it fade, watches the air reclaim it. He breathes slowly, chest rising and falling with the rhythm of the drums outside. The enemy waits, patient and strong. The city waits, fragile but unyielding. And in this pause, between drums and silence, between fire and ash, the sentinel takes one step forward. His shadow stretches long across the ruined gate, dark and wavering, yet unbroken. The griffin carved in stone remains behind him, its silent eyes staring outward, its wings folded forever against the walls. The city has not fallen yet, but it leans at the edge, suspended in the breathless moment before collapse. The walls groan, the air thickens, the people hold fast. For though hunger hollows them, though silence crushes them, though the enemy surrounds them, there is something that lingers still, a memory, a vow, a rhythm of endurance carved into flesh and stone alike. As dusk begins to creep across the sky, the drums fall quiet. The silence that follows is heavier than the sound. The sentinel grips his spear, its wood splintered, its iron tip dulled. He breathes in the cold air, tasting stone dust and smoke. Behind him, the city waits with him. Ahead, the shadows lengthen. The gate will not hold forever. But for one more night, it remains. And beyond the gate, in the darkening fields, the first coughs of fever spread through the camp, carried on breath, on whispers, on wind. Disease waits now, not only outside the walls, but within them. The siege shifts. Hunger will no longer be the only enemy. The city is about to face a shadow it cannot see, one more merciless than fire, more patient than stone. Twilight bleeds through the narrow arrow slits, violet and bruised, settling across the hall like a shroud. The light is dim, reluctant, filtering through the stone with the heaviness of dusk closing in. The air tastes of smoke and sour ale, the remnants of a feast that never truly was. On a warped wooden table, a cup lies half full, its rim stained dark where lips once pressed in silence. The wood is carved with names and notches, etched by hands long gone, the ghosts of soldiers, scribes, and children who once claimed laughter within these walls. Now, those names are blurred by time, as if the stone itself had tried to forget. Beside the cup rests a blade. Its edge is dulled, its hilt stained with sweat and blood, its once gleaming steel reduced to a dull shadow. Across it drapes a widow's shawl, thin as breath, its fringe brushing the metal like a final caress. The shawl catches the last glimmer of twilight, glows faintly, then darkens again. It lies there abandoned, yet heavy with the presence of the one who placed it, grief woven into fabric, memory tangled in each frayed thread. From the battlements above, a raven cuts the air. Its cry pierces the dusk, raw and hollow, echoing through the empty corridors. The sound lingers in stone, bouncing from arch to arch, until it seems as if the castle itself is mourning. The bird circles once, then settles on a jagged pinnacle, its wings folded like shadows made flesh. Its eyes glint in the fading light, watching, recording, promising to carry the memory outward when no one else can. In the hall, a scribe leans over parchment, her face bathed in the golden pool of lamplight. Her hand moves slowly, fingers trembling as they guide the quill across the page. Each name she writes bleeds into the parchment, ink spreading like veins. Her breath is steady, though heavy, as if each name she records presses deeper into her chest. She writes not for the living. They already know their hunger, their fear, but for the future, for the hope that someone, somewhere, will remember. The quill scratches, a faint rhythm against the silence, an echo of life amid the weight of despair. Outside, the siege presses on. Drums sound beyond the walls, their cadence relentless, the heartbeat of an enemy that does not need to sleep. Each beat vibrates in the marrow of those inside. The sound blends with the memory of coughing in dark corners, the brittle wheeze of lungs weakened by hunger and illness. Fever has begun to crawl through the fortress, carried in whispers, spreading with touch and breath. It moves invisibly, like a second army creeping through the cracks, striking where steel cannot. The scribe dips her quill again, though the ink has grown thick, clotted at its edge. She forces it to flow, forcing memory onto parchment, forcing defiance into permanence. Across the hall, a child stirs, reaching out to grasp the cup on the table. His hand is too small, his fingers too weak. The cup tips, its sour liquid spilling across the names carved in wood, filling the grooves, staining them dark. The scribe watches but does not move. She only writes faster, as though racing the spread of liquid, racing the silence. The widow enters then, her shawl gone, her face pale. She sits beside the blade, her eyes lowered, her breath shallow. She does not touch the sword, but her presence fills the hall with the gravity of farewell. Her lips part, and a whisper escapes. A name, broken and quiet, carried upward into the violet air. It is not heard by those outside, not even fully by those within. But the raven on the battlement tilts its head, listening, as if it alone has caught the sound. The quill falters, ink blotting across the parchment. The scribe presses her palm over the spill, smearing it into shadow. Her shoulders slump, but then she lifts her face, eyes gleaming with something unyielding. She dips the quill once more, her hand trembling but determined. Outside, the raven cries again, as if calling her onward. The hall darkens as twilight deepens into night. The lamplight flickers, casting the scribe's shadow across the wall. The shadow stretches long and thin, merging with the stone, as though she too were becoming part of the fortress. The widow's shawl stirs faintly in the cold air, brushing the sword's edge. The child curls into the corner, eyes heavy with sleep that hunger cannot soothe, and above them, the drums continue. Slow, steady, unrelenting. Each beat a reminder that time narrows, that the walls cannot hold forever. The scribe lowers her quill at last, fingers stained, parchment filled with names. She closes her eyes, whispering softly to the silence, "You are remembered." Her words vanish into the hall, caught between the flutter of shadows and the cry of the raven outside. The chapter closes on the image of the door carved in the wall relief. The widow lifts her hand, brushing its lines with her fingertips, her touch soft, reverent. It is only stone, a closed door, but in it lies the weight of longing, for sanctuary, for release, for a threshold that might one day open again. The raven caws once more, lifting into the night sky, wings cutting through the violet dusk. The scribe's lamp flickers. The door waits in silence. And the city, broken yet enduring, braces for the next shadow that will slip through its gates, hunger no longer alone, but sickness rising within. The siege is far from over. The story moves forward, deeper into darkness.